take a look at this article from the Wall Street Journal. They said Saudi and Emirati leaders decline calls with Biden during Ukraine crisis. New phone. Who dis? So Persian Gulf monarchies have signaled they won't help to ease surging oil prices unless Washington supports them in Yemen and elsewhere. The White House unsuccessfully tried to arrange calls between President Biden and the de facto leaders of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, as the US was working to build international support for Ukraine and contain a surge in oil prices. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the UAE's Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan both declined US requests to speak to Mr. Biden in recent weeks, the official said, as Saudi and Emirati officials have become more vocal in recent weeks in their criticism of American policy in the Gulf. Quote, there was some expectation of a phone call, but it didn't happen, said a US official of the planned discussion between the Saudi Prince Mohammed and Mr. Biden. It was part of turning on the spigot of Saudi oil, as they're saying. Mr. Biden did speak with Prince Mohammed's 86-year-old father, King Salman, on February 9th, so a month ago, when the two men reiterated their country's long-standing partnership. The UAE's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the call between Biden and Sheikh Mohammed would be rescheduled. So that's very interesting, huh? That's very interesting. They won't speak to Biden. They're sticking it to him. How do you handle that when your client states won't return your calls? What do you do? The Saudis have signaled that their relationship with Washington has deteriorated under Biden, and they want more support for their intervention in Yemen's civil war. I guess Biden hasn't sold them enough bombs to kill Yemenis with, right? I guess 115 billion under Obama, 300 billion under Trump. Yeah, they're craving a bit more. They want some more weapons, you know. And Biden, he said that he's only going to support the Saudis in a defensive capacity, which of course means nothing at all because he's still supporting them. But I guess they want it to be a bit more overt, right? So they want more support for their intervention in Yemen's civil war. I love how they call it an intervention in Yemen's civil war. No. It's a Saudi-led bloodbath in Yemen. It's not a Saudi intervention. It's a Saudi war against Yemen. God, the way they whitewash this is fucking unbelievable, right? Because guess who's selling the weapons? It's the US. So, of course, they don't want to call it out for what it is. They want help also with their own civilian nuclear programs as Iran's moves ahead. And legal immunity for Prince Mohammed in the US, said Saudi officials. The Crown Prince faces multiple lawsuits in the US, including over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. Yeah, I bet he'd like that. Notice how the Biden administration, they came out and said that we think Saudi Arabia is behind the killing of Khashoggi, but no condemnation, no sanctions, nothing. All right? Even though the guy was a Washington Post journalist, U.S. resident. Unbelievable. The Emiratis share Saudi concerns about the restrained U.S. response to recent missile strikes by Iran-backed Houthi militants in Yemen against the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So they're talking about when in January 3rd, for example, there was a Emirati-flagged ship that was seized by the Yemenis. And the Saudis said, no, you can't do that. It's piracy. This ship is carrying medical supplies. And it turns out it's just full of weapons and like a little bit of medical supplies. But it's mostly weapons and military equipment. And then afterwards, they say the Houthis, it's the Yemenis. They struck Abu Dhabi with drones and ballistic missiles. So again, this shows you that they have an increased military capability. They are, of course, supported by Iran. I don't know to what level they are supporting Yemen militarily and technologically, but they say in the media that, you know, Iran is providing them with this technology and so on. But yeah, it was kind of a wake-up call. They were shocked because, you know, until now, the UAE, they've been killing Yemenis. They've been helping Saudi Arabia with this genocide, but they ain't feeling the war at home. The front is far away. It's nice and comfortable back here. And the Houthis, the Yemenis, they changed that equation. It's not the first time, but this was also a response to the UAE-backed forces that were in Shabwa and Ma'rib, because they were taking ground. And so that was their response to it. Both governments are also concerned about the revival of the Iran nuclear deal, which does not address other security concerns of theirs and has entered the final stages of negotiations in recent weeks. So translation, they have the same view as Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. When they say security concerns, what does that mean? It's nothing to do with a nuclear weapon. Again, Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program. It has a civilian one. Even this article said that. It's nothing to do with that. When they say security concerns, like we're concerned about Iran's malign activity, they mean Iran supporting Syria, Iran supporting the Palestinians, Iran supporting the Lebanese, Iran supporting the Yemenis. That's what's going on. They don't want that because Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not aligned with Arabs and Muslims. They're aligned with U.S. interests. They're a petro state, a client state of the U.S., right? The White House has worked to repair relations with two key Middle Eastern countries it needs on its side as oil prices push over $130 a barrel for the first time in almost 14 years. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates are the only two major oil producers that can pump millions of barrels of more oil, a capacity that, if used, could help calm the crude market at a time when American gasoline prices are at high levels. So do you see what's going on now? Biden, he's like, oh shit, we sanctioned Russia. The price of crude has gone up. We've banned the Russian oil. It's gone up even further. European gas prices, boom, skyrocketed. Quick, what do? Let's go to Maduro. Okay, you're totally the president now. Forget Guaido. You're the president, Mr. Presidente. Come on, give us some of that oil. We can't get it from the Russians. Help us, please. You're the president, we swear. And then, of course, now they're rushing to do the Iran nuclear deal. All of a sudden, yes, let's lift the sanctions off Iran so the Iranian oil can come back on the market. Their oil sector is no longer targeted. They can sell their oil and the price will come down, right? And let's go quick to the Saudis and the Emiratis. They'll help us, right? They're our buddies. So do you see how they're panicking? They're like, shit, we need to replace this oil somewhere because this is going to cause domestic problems. You can only say it's the Putin price hike for so long. If Putin is behind the price hike, then why the fuck are you going to the Saudis and the Emiratis and kissing Maduro's ass now, showing some respect finally, and also trying to get the Iran nuclear deal done all of a sudden? Huh? If it's just Putin. No, they know they're in trouble. They know they're in trouble. And they're trying to say like, oh, we're going to punish him. No, you're punishing yourselves. You're punishing, actually, the elites, Biden and his cronies, they don't get punished. They won't feel the pain. It's American citizens, civilians, residents in the West who will feel the bite of these sanctions. And they know that. And that's going to cause them a lot of problems domestically because you can only blame Putin for so long. Brett McGurk, the National Security Council's Middle East coordinator, and Amos Hochstein, the State Department's energy envoy, both traveled to Riyadh, the Saudi capital, late last month to try and mend fences with Saudi officials. Mr. McGurk also met with Sheikh Mohammed in Abu Dhabi in a bid to address Emirati frustrations over the U.S. response to the Houthi attacks. Man, you got to understand something. After the Yemenis, they hit Abu Dhabi with those ballistic missiles and the drones. The Saudis, they went on a rampage and they bombed a prison. They killed 70 people. They took out Yemen's internet. This was just a month ago, right? We're talking about it. They were very savage. And who paid for? Who gave them those bombs? Who funded? Who is supplying their war effort? It's the Americans. So honestly, there was a response. Even if you don't want to admit it, but there was an indirect, an implicit involvement of the Americans in this. So don't rule that out. But I understand what they're talking about. They want the U.S. to support them openly like they did under Trump and under Obama and sell them more weapons. They're not satisfied. They have a bloodlust that needs to be satisfied. And they'll eventually get to that. We know who Biden is. The call with Sheikh Mohammed in early February was expected to focus on ways the two countries could counter attacks from Yemen. One U.S. official said the Biden administration has worked diligently to strengthen Saudi and Emirati missile defenses and that America would be doing more in the coming months to help the two Gulf nations protect themselves. It may not be all the two countries want, the official said, but the U.S. is trying to address their security concerns. But the Saudis and Emiratis have declined to pump more oil, saying they are sticking to a production plan approved between their group, OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, and a group of other producers led by Russia. the energy alliance with Russia, one of the world's top oil producers, has enhanced OPEC's power while also bringing the Saudis and Emiratis closer to Moscow. Both Prince Mohammed and Sheikh Mohammed took phone calls from the Russian President Vladimir Putin last week after declining to speak with Biden. They both later spoke with Ukraine's president, and a Saudi official said the US had requested that Prince Mohammed mediate in the conflict, which he said the kingdom is embarking on. Wow. That's a bit of a pickle. Do you see again what I was telling you, that we are seeing a global realignment? What have I been telling you, man? Pakistan, Imran Khan, the prime minister, went to Russia the day of this so-called special operation, and he bought 1 million tons of wheat and natural gas. Just last month, China, Russia, they signed a gas deal. But let's say after the conflict, at the UN, General Assembly resolution to condemn Russia. Iran abstains, Iraq abstains, India abstains, Pakistan abstains, South Africa abstains, China abstains. 35 countries abstained from condemning Russia because they know where their bread is buttered, and they know that the US and the West are done for. This is just a question of time. And ironically, they're speeding it up. We know that with the Belt and Road Initiative, with Greater Eurasia, these economic and geopolitical projects that are coming to fruition, that the West is going to be irrelevant anyway. We're shifting to a multipolar world. And people are not so keen to do the bidding of the Americans. They're really, really not so keen to do the bidding of Westerners. And just to drive my point home, let me show you this speech from Iran's Prime Minister Imran Khan, and take a look at what he has to say.
अभी ये जरा सुने, यूरोपियन यूनियन के एम्बेसडर ने खत लिखा पाकिस्तान को कि आप रूस के खिलाफ उसके मुखालिफ स्टेटमेंट दें, उसके खिलाफ वोट दें। मैं ये यूरोपियन यूनियन के एम्बेसडर से पूछता हूं कि क्या आपने हिंदुस्तान को भी ये खत लिखा था? क्योंकि मैं अपनी कौम को याद करवाना चाहता हूं कि ये वो पाकिस्तान था जिसने ये नेटो की मदद की, जो वॉर ऑन टेरर थी, हमने उनका साथ दिया। मैं कभी ना साथ देता, मैं अपनी मुल्क को बाहर रखता उस जंग से, लेकिन उस वक्त का जो सरबराह था उनका साथ दिया। क्या मिला पाकिस्तान को? 80,000 पाकिस्तानियों की जानें गई। और दूसरा, जब कश्मीर में हिंदुस्तान ने इंटरनेशनल कानून तोड़ा, यूनाइटेड नेशंस की सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल की रेजोल्यूशंस की खिलाफ वर्जी करते हुए जो कश्मीर का स्टेटस खत्म किया, क्या आप में से किसी ने हिंदुस्तान से कोई राब्ता तोड़ा, कोई उनकी तनकीद की, कोई तिजारत बंद की? तो हम आपके सामने क्या हैं? क्या हम कोई गुलाम हैं कि जो आप कहेंगे हम कर लें?
Very, very powerful. Very powerful. Again, this is from my news outlet In Context. Go follow on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube. I'm always posting stuff like this every single day. But very powerful words. He said, you think we're your slaves? You think you're running the show here? When we helped NATO, you killed 80,000 Pakistanis. And again, much love to Pakistan. I lived there for a couple years when I was very young. I miss it very much. I think it's a beautiful country. Very, very beautiful. Love it. Hope I can go back someday. But you see what's going on. That's a very clear rejection of the West, not just economically by buying wheat and gas from the Russians the day that everyone is turning on the Russians, but also here against the EU, pushing back on them. And again, India, for their part, also, they refuse to condemn the Russians. A lot of their military equipment is Russian, so they've already invested a lot in that relationship. And also Turkey, for example, Turkey has bought Russian equipment recently, the S-400 surface-to-air missile defense system. They also have a lot of their gas coming from the Russians. So they're a NATO country, but, you know, they had to keep those straits open to let the Russian warships through from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea just long enough so they could get through. And then they closed it like, see, we closed the straits and blocked it for the Russians. Yeah. Even Turkey is and today you had talks there. So even Turkey is trying to play both sides because it has to. So a lot of countries, and now Saudi Arabia and the UAE are refusing to take Biden's calls. Honestly, man, I've never heard of someone refusing to take the American president's call. I mean, again, I don't want to, you know, gas up the Americans thing like, oh, they're so important, everyone should just drop what they're doing and bend down, you know, bend over backwards and just grab the phone whenever the US president calls. Like, no. But geopolitically speaking, realistically speaking, you know, most world leaders would have taken that call. And the fact that the heads of these client states, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, did not, I think that's significant. I think it's very significant. And man, if I were Russia and Venezuela and Iran, I would play hardball right now because you got the US by the fucking balls. You got them by the balls. The Americans are stupid. They're really fucking dumb because before sanctioning Russia, they should have made sure that they're going to get something instead from Venezuela. They should have made sure the Saudis have their back. Not let's go shit on Russia and deprive ourselves of 3% of our oil revenue and the Europeans of Nord Stream 2 and make the price of crude skyrocket, the highest since 2008, and the price of European gas skyrocket, and then try and figure out what to do. You chumps. You absolute chumps. You dunces. What have you done? This is exactly what I mean when the West is shooting itself in the foot. They're so incompetent. I mean, Biden's team, they're really just stupid as hell. God. Saudi Arabia and the UAE forged deep ties with former President Donald Trump, who sided with them in a regional dispute with Qatar, pulled the US out of the Iran nuclear deal that they had opposed, made his first trip abroad to Riyadh in 2017, and stood by Prince Mohammed after the killing of Mr. Khashoggi. That's vile. Again, you know, absolutely vile. But Mr. Trump's decision not to respond to an Iranian drone and missile attack on major Saudi oil sites in 2019 rattled Gulf partners who have relied for decades on the promise of U.S. security protection. Iran denied involvement in the oil facility attacks. Yeah, so you remember what Trump said about the Saudis? He said, like, if we pull our support, you know, they'll be done in 2 weeks. You remember when he said that? He's right. The Saudis are nothing without U.S. support, and that speaks to the fact that the war in Yemen could be ended like that as well, among other things. And so the rift between Mr. Biden and Saudi Arabia's crown prince stretches back to the 2020 presidential election, when the Democratic candidate vowed to treat the kingdom as a pariah state after a Saudi hit team killed Mr. Khashoggi in 2018 in Istanbul. There is, quote, very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia, Mr. Biden said during a presidential debate in 2019. After taking office, Mr. Biden released a U.S. intelligence report. That's the one I was telling you about. That was by Avril Haines, the director of national security. Right, I covered it right here the day that it came out, so that's what they're referring to. So after Mr. Biden took office, he released a U.S. intelligence report that concluded that Prince Mohammed had approved the plan to capture or kill Mr. Khashoggi, who had been an outspoken critic of the young Saudi ruler. Prince Mohammed has denied knowing anything about the plot, even though people close to him were convicted by a Saudi court of taking part in murdering the journalist. Mr. Biden also publicly castigated Saudi Arabia over its protracted war in Yemen and cut off the flow of some weapons Riyadh could use to target Yemen. The president also reversed a move by his predecessor that put the Yemenis on America's list of global terrorist groups, a move that Saudi leaders said had emboldened the Yemeni force and thwarted efforts to broker a ceasefire. So again, that's the thing with the Democrats, with Biden, right? It's like he comes in a few days after Pompeo, on the way out, declares the Houthis, the Yemenis, as a special designated, they put the Houthis on a terrorist list. And so he changes that, right? They put them on a list of SDN, so specially designated nationals, and FTO, foreign terrorist organizations, sanctioning them. And of course, I told you the ramifications of that, which would starve Yemen even more than it's already been starved, which, I mean, I can't even wrap my mind around that, but that's what it would have happened. And so Biden comes in and he reverses that, which is perhaps the only redeeming quality in this affair. But you have to remember, he was in Obama's administration when they started the war in Yemen. And he says that they're going to cut off weapons to the Saudis. It's a lie. They just cut off a few and they just give them the rest. Something important you guys need to understand. It's not just the weapons. There is an oil embargo on Yemen by the government in Aden and the Saudis, right? So I'm going to publish an investigative piece on that very soon, and I'm going to show you precisely how the oil embargo is killing Yemenis, and it's also funding Al-Qaeda in Yemen. So on Monday, Ms. Psaki, the White House spokesperson, said the president stood by his view that Saudi Arabia should be treated like a pariah state and that the leadership had little redeeming social value. When asked in an interview with The Atlantic magazine last week if Biden misunderstood the Saudi leader, Prince Mohammed responded simply, "I do not care." Prince Mohammed said alienating the Saudi leaders would hurt the US president. It's up to him to think about the interests of America. Go for it. Yeah, so again, translation means fuck around and find out, because we got you by the balls with the oil. Again, Saudi is one of the world's top oil producers. The US is a net importer, not exporter of oil. It needs Russian oil. It needs Saudi oil. So, unless Biden's got some magic trick up his sleeve, again, this is what the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the US has always been, right? It's, you guys give us oil, you act as the regional policeman for us, and we'll turn a blind eye to your terrorist funding activities when you're trying to export Wahhabism to, God knows where, and groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which again they were funded from the start and received lots of support from the Saudis, and so on, right? So that's always been the deal, the unwritten rule. And so one U.S. official acknowledged that Prince Mohammed is the key Saudi decision maker, and the Biden administration will have to find ways to work with the Crown Prince on everything from energy policy to normalizing relations with Israel. Oh, man. I told you that's going to happen. Like, it's obvious. The Saudis and the Israelis, they have dealings under the table. Of course. It's going to happen. I'm telling you. I wouldn't be surprised if Biden did it. So along with Saudis, UAE has urged the US to put the Yemenis on its list of terrorist groups and to send more military aid to help defend the country from more attacks. But the US hasn't moved to address those concerns, according to Gulf officials. Again, what is this language? Like, defend the country. What? From one strike? You're the one bombing Yemen, not the other way around. You're the aggressor, not the other way around. What is this unbelievable logic? Military aid. It's not aid. It's lethal. These are lethal armaments and payloads that are used to commit a genocide. End of story. It's not aid, whatever you want to call it. It's not defensive. General McKenzie said last month, who's head of the U.S. Central Command, that he flew to Abu Dhabi for some meetings with Emirati leaders and discussed beefing up security in the wake of the Yemeni strikes. McKenzie wanted to meet with Sheikh Mohammed, but was unable to get time with the Emirati leader. Last week, Yusuf Al-Otaiba, the UAE ambassador to the US, said that relations between the two countries were strained. It's like any relationship, he said in Abu Dhabi. It has strong days where the relationship is very healthy and days where the relationship is under question. Today we're going through a stress test, but I'm confident that we will get out of it and get to a better place. We'll see. But I just think this is very, it's very funny. And the Americans should have calculated for this before. This is the problem is that in the end, whatever happens, when you say America's getting screwed, it's not Biden who's getting screwed. He's going to be rich and he's going to be able to keep his standard of living. The problem is the people, the average citizens, the average Americans who can't fill up their gas tanks anymore, who are being robbed at the pump, or they can't buy food anymore. And the same thing in the West. In Europe, you have people who can't pay for gas. They can't buy basic goods. That is the problem. Do you understand? But at the same time, this is a question of also what's the future of U.S. hegemony? What's the future of Western hegemony? That is being put into question right now. And I think it's a really incredible moment, geopolitically speaking, because 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I think you would have seen a much different reaction in terms of global support. Again, I know they give you the impression on TV that the whole world is condemning Russia. The West is not the whole world. And if you're consuming Western news, you're getting a Western point of view on everything. And, the rest of the planet, half of the planet, China, Pakistan, India, these are not tiny countries. They're not tiny at all. And many others, many others, they don't agree with the U.S. and the West, and they're not about to, dive headfirst into a snake pit. They're not about to shoot themselves in the foot. So it is interesting seeing that there's this sort of rift. The usual people that would kind of cower under U.S. pressure and then go against Russia and so on, they're not ready to do that because we're transitioning to a different world, a different economic and world order. And this is just another symptom of that. It just further confirms what we were talking about. Who knows? It could turn out that, they mend ties and everything is back to normal with the good old Saudis and the Americans. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think the other things that I told you were much more potent when it comes to Pakistan, India, Iran, and so on, and China. I think that really signals a lot. But this is also something that you should take into account.